Now I'll introduce your speaker for today. Chris Burgy is the VP of Corporate Development for Ooma. He is responsible for mergers and acquisitions, strategic partnerships, and driving Ooma's strategy for Enterprise Unified Communications as a Service, or UCaaS. Prior to joining Ooma, Chris was Vice President of Corporate Strategy at ShoreTel. Hello, Chris. Thank you for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. It's a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to present on copper lines. There's a variety of different levels of awareness of what's going on with the plain old telephone system lines here in the US. And much of this has been set in motion a number of years ago, going back even as far as a decade. There's been discussion of turning down that old copper network, primarily because it's really expensive to maintain for the incumbent carriers, and frankly, it's pretty aging. A lot of that infrastructure was put in place decades ago. And so you fast forward to a few years back now, and the FCC actually issued some orders that set this whole process into motion. And those orders actually provided two different reliefs, if you will, for the incumbent carriers here in the US. The first is they actually allowed for the deprecation or the sunset of the copper network, but at the incumbent carrier's pace. So there's no mandated time frame that this needed to occur by. It's really up to each carrier like AT&T or Verizon or Frontier, for instance, to decide when they want to shut the copper network down. The second piece of that order, and the more important one, is it provided something called forbearance for the carriers. So historically, these copper lines were actually regulated in terms of the price that they had to be sold at out in the market. And forbearance lifts all of that regulation. And so now it's up to the prerogative of each carrier what they want to charge for these old copper lines that are out there. And the reality is this has created a situation that's forcing a lot of attention, frankly, for folks. So there are carriers that are in fact turning down copper lines. That has been happening around the country, again, at a very different pace between the carriers. But more importantly, especially in the last year or so, we've seen unprecedented price increases for those existing lines. So it's very, very common for us to engage with customers who have a bill coming up or a contract coming up on renewal, and their price triples or quadruples. So where you'd see POTS lines typically in an environment previously that may be $40 to $80 a month, it is very common now to see customers paying between $400 to $600 a month for a single line. And we've seen some exceptional examples of over $1,000 a month for a single POTS line. The issue is a lot of the easy devices that have been needed to migrate have already done so. And so what you're left with is a whole bunch of what we call specialty devices that a lot of organizations really haven't wanted to migrate, but now they're being forced to do so because of the deprecation in some instances, more importantly, because of the sheer cost of maintaining these lines. Similarly, the carriers have been underinvesting in this network for years now. So where the old copper network was considered highly reliable, that's no longer the case anymore. And part of that is the aging infrastructure, the aging copper in the grounds, and a lot of the technicians retiring that have worked on this equipment for years. So it's common to run into environments where lines just stop working and the carrier refuses to fix it, or you have weather events like rain, and so it degrades the quality significantly. And so it's really prompted a desire by many organizations to look for alternative solutions. As you think about these types of devices and POTS lines in your environment, they run through a whole smattering of different types of devices, and in particular, some that impact life safety systems. So it's very common to see elevators, for instance, needing a copper line. Code actually requires that you have a voice line serving that for emergency purposes. Fire panels are another wonderful example that are regulated. And so your local fire inspector comes into that environment. So there are very specific requirements around how you have to serve those fire alarm panels in your environment from a compliance perspective that are important, because you may run into a scenario where the local fire inspector actually issues a fine for being non-compliant. And we've seen some circumstances with elevators and fire panels that were out of compliance, and the local fire inspector actually revoked the certificate of occupancy for that building. In addition, it's very common to run into commercial burglar alarm systems that are still operating over copper lines, gate phones, blue light safety phones, various door entry intercom systems, for instance. We've seen a smattering of different types of sensors out there, like CO2 sensors, for instance, down in the boiler room. And of course, traditional voice use cases like fax machines that you still have in your environment, on-premise phone systems that still leverage POTS lines. So the reality is we have millions of these devices that still exist that are operating over copper lines that need to be transitioned as this phased deprecation occurs, and more importantly, to generate a great return on investment for companies as the underlying carriers dramatically increase the cost of these lines. Organizations of all sizes are trying to figure out, how do I really approach transitioning away from this legacy network infrastructure for my voice lines into something a bit more modern and reliable? And so you think about the options that you have out in the environment today. The first is you can just park your decision effectively, and you continue to pay ever increasing costs. And the carriers are using these price increases as a forcing function, to be honest, to try to incent folks to move away from that copper network so they can effectively shut it down. So while kicking the can down the road is certainly an option, do expect increasing costs each year as you come up on renewal for your agreement. And bear in mind that there is a risk that those lines either could have an issue and they're not repaired, or the carrier provides notice, oftentimes that 60-day window, that they're going to turn off those lines and you will have to find a solution. The second is you can actually approach this from a device level. So if you look at fire alarm panels or commercial burglar panels, you can replace those devices and upgrade them to alternative cellular solutions called communicators, for instance. But that necessitates a really big expense because you're buying a brand new panel for that environment. And then you have to project manage a rollout of replacing all of the panels. A little bit easier if you have one or two panels, dramatically more complex if you have hundreds of properties or hundreds of locations where you need to complete a project. And then the other option is looking at POTS replacement solutions, a much more modern approach to converting this over to digital communications, if you will, often over cellular and wireline networks. So these solutions, POTS replacement, are designed as effectively a drop-in replacement in your wiring closet, is a good way to think about this, where the end devices actually terminate into a POTS replacement device that converts it all over to digital communications. And then it traverses over the cellular network, over the wireline network, with an aim to hopefully make this as easy as possible to facilitate the migration. The great news is you don't have to do anything with your end devices in that environment. As far as they're concerned, this is the same POTS line that they've been plugged into for years. They can't tell any difference whatsoever. So it makes it a lot more elegant and seamless approach to transitioning lots of devices in your environment away from those copper lines. So looking at how to approach a POTS replacement solution, we like a three-phase process that we recommend that really helps organizations understand what's going on in their environment via an audit, selecting a solution, and then rolling through the installation process to convert over those devices. The audit process is actually really important for a lot of environments. You wouldn't be surprised how many companies haven't looked at this in years, frankly. And then you come down to an issue of, well, what is actually using POTS lines in my environment? How many lines am I actually paying for today? And so going through that audit process, a good thing to do is take a look at your bills, so you understand what you're actually paying the carriers today, so you have a concept of how many lines overall may be in your environment. And then it's important to actually locate those lines and understand where they're terminating in your buildings, where you would need a POTS replacement device to be plugged into, what the wiring looks like to get to each of those devices in the environment, and then an inventory of the type of end devices that you have. Are you dealing primarily with burglar and fire in your environment? Is it more fax devices and building entry, gate entry systems? All of that would help a POTS replacement provider scope out a project engagement, and more importantly, as you get to the installation phase, really streamline that whole process so you don't drag out a conversion project. There are a lot of different solutions that are available on the market for POTS replacement. And so there's some really important things to understand as you evaluate offerings out in the market. The first is regulatory compliance. As I mentioned earlier, elevators and fire panels are actually regulated. So there's different code. The local fire department and the inspectors have purview over this as the authority having jurisdiction. So putting in a solution that meets all of the compliance requirements, especially for fire, which is most stringent, is critical in your environment. The last thing that you would want is to have the inspector come in and fine you, or again, revoke the certificate of occupancy on a building. The second is you want this type of solution to be really flexible to handle any type of device in your environment, and you want something that's really easy to manage, so you don't have to think about it. So the ability to remotely monitor all of your POTS replacement devices in your environment, understand when events are occurring via notifications like text messages or email, for instance, really streamlines this because it's something that you install, and honestly, it's kind of set it and forget it. So you only want to know about key events when they're occurring in your environment. The next is looking for an organization that has a strong reputation and scale that can obviously throw the resources behind making this product successful, making installation successful, and providing 24/7, 365-day support on a solution if you have any questions or issues that ever arise in your environment. As you go through the installation process, this is the key to making the project successful. So one of the big steps, obviously, is understanding the environment as we go through that inventory process, and then you parlay that over into the project management and rollout process. So you have a clear understanding of where all of the devices are, and most importantly, that you can test those devices before you go through a porting process. And once you go through a porting process, it's important to understand when you leave an incumbent carrier like Verizon or AT&T or Frontier, you are not going to go back. So you really want to verify that all of the devices are functioning properly in that environment before you issue a port of that phone number away. Selecting the right partner for a solution is obviously critical in that testing phase. And then you want to minimize downtime in this environment. So porting can be tricky, but with the right partners, it's a very elegant process to manage. You can time the port over so that there's minimal downtime for any devices. And again, that's important for life safety systems. Look at fire panels, elevators, safety phones that exist in environments. You don't want to have any scenario where someone tries to make an emergency call on one of those devices and you are unable to do so. So the key is to try to make this as easy as possible in an environment. Again, this is kind of a plug and play transition as you swap that wiring over. So picking the right type of solution can really make this an elegant, simple process and get through installation quickly so that your facilities or IT departments, whoever owns this ultimately in that environment, can get back to more important projects for the end customers. And so we built Ooma AirDial to solve for exactly this scenario. And this really leveraged a lot of the heritage that we have as a company in this space, dating all the way back to 2004, where we started with residential voice. And we have a lot of inherent expertise in designing hardware with cellular communication options across our product portfolio. We built AirDial specifically for the toughest use cases out there, which would be fire, alarm, and security panels. Believe it or not, there are a lot of very, very old panels that are out there that have been upgraded in years that often don't operate to spec or operate in very peculiar manners. And so we designed our holistic end-to-end architecture to be very adaptable to those types of devices and make them work where other solutions in the market can't. But of course, we made it a very flexible platform to serve just about any kind of device that you would want to plug into Ooma AirDial. Each unit comes with 4 ports. So you can serve up to 4 analog devices, and it operates over cellular and wireline connectivity for enhanced reliability. The other important thing to look at that we incorporated into our design is battery backup. That's required for elevators and fire panels, for instance, but it's a great benefit for about any other device. And that battery is actually a replaceable battery inside of the AirDial hardware. We all have had cell phones. We know that battery life deteriorates over time. So instead of replacing the whole unit, you pop out the battery and put a new battery into it. We also made this fully cloud managed and monitored. So we collect real-time telematics and telemetry on each AirDial unit. There's a portal called Remote Device Manager, which facilitates the installation, configuration, and ongoing monitoring of the AirDial solution. And of course, this being something that operates kind of behind the scenes, we built notifications into the platform so you can receive SMS and email notifications when key events happen. So you don't have to live in the platform to understand what's occurring in your environment. And all of this is backed by Ooma, which is a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. Significant experience doing this at scale on the hardware front, on the services front, on the support front, and the installation front. And we really want to make this as seamless as possible for end customers to go through this transition, save money, and have peace of mind that their environment is going to operate reliably with all of the devices that they want to plug into a solution. So the key for us is making it an all-in-one solution, which is different than other offerings on the market. So Ooma owns the entire technology stack. It is our hardware that we designed, our software running on it, and our core cloud service that supports over 2 million users today on our calling platform. Highly reliable, very mature technology for us. And an inherent part of our ethos as a company is simplicity. And we really poured a lot of effort into making AirDial very simple for customers to deploy in their environment. And then we support that with an end-to-end assessment, everything from a site survey if it's necessary to performing professional services for installation. We've seen kind of a mixed bag on customers. You have some where the IT department or facilities is happy to take this on, something they do kind of day in and day out. We have others where they're too busy with lots of projects and they'd rather somebody just handle the whole initiative cradle to grave for them. So we're very adaptable and flexible with that regard and really helping you kind of usher through this process in your environment with a reliable, top-notch solution that will give you peace of mind and save a lot of money compared to what you're paying today with the incumbent carriers.